Hi, my name is Kenneth Subbott. I'm also from Kinetum. I've been part of the testing side and then drafting the documentation for the events.
Hi, I'm Jason Schaffler, and I'm on the Environmental Integrity Committee of the ICS, and I've mostly been involved in the renewable energy side of it, so this is quite an exciting development.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? My name is Robert Lowe. I'm here representing the software team from Bradford, and we helped build the software for the ICS platform.
Thank you, everybody. I think we need to up the volume a little bit, so next time we get a chance to just get a little bit closer to the mic. Chris, first question for you. Questions. Two questions really. The first is, food trees, the name suggests that you may have something to do with trees. So if you can maybe answer the following, I'll shoot them off one and then you can answer them in one go. In food and trees existence, how many trees have you planted? How much carbon did you get for it? And in the hypothetical event that something like the ICS did exist, and assuming that you could get 1 ton for every surviving tree, and 100 rands for every ton of carbon, and if you found the sums, we said, yeah, no, I'm joking about that. Just basically, how many trees you planted, did you get carbon? If it was possible for you in a practical sense to actually get carbon for the trees that you have planted, what would the difference have been for this little country we live in? Can you just...
Yeah, okay. So to date, Food and Trees for Africa has planted approximately...
Can somebody go and call the technical guy for us? Robert, can you run out and call the technical guy, or no, Riz came, and ask him to just up the volume on this microphone?
Can you hear me when I speak normally? Yeah. Okay. So to date, we've planted approximately, I would say, 4.7 million trees. It's hard to talk about the survival rate before a certain period, but I can tell you that our survival rate currently is quite high. We've probably moved from about 80% to anywhere north of 90–95% in certain projects, based on our methodologies, select all that kind of thing.
Sorry. Apologies. Okay. No, it's my mic that's causing the feedback. I'll switch now.
I'm just going to assume that we have 3 million survived trees, right? I think that's a very, probably more, but let's just say 3 million. Current pricing, you're looking at what, 300 million rand that we would have additional at the current carbon price in South Africa. Gee, what could we do at 300 million? If anyone has it for us, give it to us, I'll let you know. Look, I think it would be a very different country. I mean, obviously, we do a lot of food security work. We also run the largest school gardening and nutrition program in the country. We run the largest market gardening program in the country. We have a whole lot of agroecological projects going on. So I think like an injection like that would have definitely changed what we do. Well, not change what we do, it would change our impact for sure. And that's not including probably the carbon credits that we would have got from the additional trees that we would have planted with that money over time. I mean, you're probably looking at about R500 million that we would have probably gotten over this time. And if you know our organization, you know our impact, you would know that we're very thrifty with it. And I think it would go a long way. I think it would be very different for us, and I think very different for the country. I don't know if that answers the question.
We've got a technical guy. I'm just going to switch this on again. Like I did before. No, this seems fine. Just the mic volume on the roaming mics are too low, and we're getting feedback now that I'd like to. Okay, so let's hear if this one's okay. And if you can just turn up the mic. So can you now for Olivia, Philip, Kenneth, and Robert, I've got the same question, and then right at the end we'll come to Jason to talk about the integrity. But the same question for every one of the four now is, in the area of the development of the ICS that you've been involved with, how would you describe the challenges or hurdles? And can you just describe to the people in the room and online how we've actually solved it? And what we've done, especially in the areas where there's been some innovation and where there were difficult hurdles. And if you are too shy and you don't tell us about what you've done, I will embarrass you by saying, yeah, but you've got about this and this and this. So please just go through.
Okay, can you hear me now? I think really one of my biggest challenges was to make sure that our innovative approaches that we were looking at didn't compromise the integrity of the carbon credits that would come out of the system. And I think it's really worth dwelling on this point, because the integrity of the product that does come out has a direct benefit for the people in our ecosystem, but as quite rightly mentioned previously, it's a bigger discussion. It reflects on the global market for these types of commodities. And I think that one of the ways in which we looked at ensuring the integrity of the products was to use technology, new technology, to digitize wherever possible. There you reduce risks of human error. You reduce auditing burdens. There's transparency in those systems. But I think also to another degree, we did try to leverage off much of the work and systems that were already in place, that had already been thought about, argued about, and these come from the legacy carbon programs that are functional and still going. And to mention a few of those is, additionality is still a requirement in this carbon program. It's not something that we have thrown out the window, and I think we leverage on the principles and the work that has been done by these other standards in order to demonstrate additionality. I think independent auditing, absolutely key. Again, that's not a new concept, and these must be accredited auditors as well, so that's not new. Hopefully we want to make the processes more simpler and cheaper, but also to have a very, very strong governance structure in terms of quality checking, in terms of making sure that there's no conflict of interest, in terms of the financial operation of the program, as well as the actual work that gets done, the integrity of the carbon credits.
Thank you. I think that was sufficient. I don't have to ask you any other embarrassing questions.
So the largest challenges that I have had have been around language. And that may seem strange, but Olivia's used a set of terms now that are actually very similar to terms that we would use in IT or the mathematical modeling. They mean different things. So Olivia said tools, and there she meant auditing, additionality, baseline. When I talk about tools, I talk about mathematical solvers, databases, websites. For me, the challenge has been translating from Olivia's language into these other languages, which Robert and Kenneth will talk about. So the main challenge has been the integration between languages so that we all understand each other.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what Philip said. I said to people in the past, I've got a superpower. My superpower is I cannot write one single line of code. So I can imagine things that may seem impossible to code. And then Philip sits here and he talks a little bit about tools and stuff like that. But I can tell you now that when we sat down in the beginning, and then I said to him, I think we should build a system where somebody who cannot code anything can sit down in front of a computer and upload some stuff, And the result of that would be a smart contract. Smart contract is a piece of code that executes automatically when certain conditions are met, that can actually do all the magic in the background. I didn't know that it was possible to actually write that code. I'm not aware of another system where you can sit down and you can say, I want to build a methodology that looks at the emissions coming out of a landfill site using the first order decay model in a temperate environment, and with zero coding background, I can sit down, I can punch that into my keyboard, and the system will generate the code to actually.
ChatGPT.
We started 5 years before ChatGPT. We started at the time GPT-1 was being conceived. So Philip's actually achieved that. And I think that is, I think, a spectacular achievement. So sorry, Philip, I just had to mention that because you great one.
So the most challenging thing that I found was actually having to learn how to use the new solver, because it does use a new syntax. So I've been using Excel for all the calculations for a couple of years, and now I've got to try and translate that into syntax for AMPL. And then we started with one solver and then moved it to another, so I then had to relearn new syntax. But we now have a document called methodology manual, which hopefully should reduce how much time we have to spend in the AMPL manual itself, which is a couple of 100 pages. So yeah.
Just pass to Robert first.
Yes, about the difficulties developing the software system. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone from Food and Trees and Medium, because something that has not been a challenge was persistence and determination. And sometimes when there is a big ambitious project like this, the ambition fades out over time, especially when there are difficulties. So it's been great working with you. Now, there have been some challenges. One of the biggest challenges relates to the trade-off. So the reason people do use Excel for these calculations is because it's easy. And you can do almost anything in Excel. So we wanted to build that kind of, those kind of rich features into the ICS platform, but then still make it more reliable. One of the big reasons Excel is not reliable is because it's very easy to use the same cells in the spreadsheet to enter both data and equations. And this makes it very tricky to review. Some of you may be very proficient with Excel and very experienced and know some techniques how to make it easier to find and correct issues in spreadsheets. And that being said, there are still issues. So this flexibility that you have comes at a cost. For example, sometimes Excel just thinks it's a date, what you just entered. And that has actually caused issues to the extent that there was a meta-analysis done in a specific field, I think it was genetics, where they used Excel. And because of this automatic conversion to data, a fifth of the papers considered had issues in their spreadsheets. And this was peer-reviewed science that got published. Yeah, so you can look it up. But it was just in that field just because of this specific empowering feature from Excel. So we wanted to keep things very simple, but still empower our users. And the question is, how do we do that? And so the first step is to separate the data and the equations. And thanks to the Medium team, they devised a database structure that would make it possible to accommodate any carbon project in the database. Now, in addition to that, we had to program the equations like Kenneth alluded to. The challenge there was also, how do we make it efficient? So what we've done is used a mathematical solver called AMPL. So if you were to build a set of equations with a tool like MATLAB or coded in Python, and you wanted to solve these equations very quickly, you would then integrate the the code that we've written into this mathematical solver in order to solve it efficiently. So we've built that same mathematical solver from a set of mathematical solvers from AMPL into the ICS platform. And this combination of the programming language and the database structure should empower any carbon project to be uploaded onto the platform. And now the challenge that's next, as Kenneth alluded to, is learning the syntax. But because it uses very common mathematical concepts like sums and divisions, it should be very easy for all you capable and smart people to learn.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
lastly,
Yeah.
what was not a challenge was the IoT. So just one more word on that. So it turns out that IoT devices are actually a very established technology. And we've been running a pilot project for almost a year now, and we haven't had any hiccups. It works perfectly. So I'm very excited to get some real projects on the system and to see what everyone in the community can do.
Okay, my last question for, sorry I interrupted somebody back there. My last question for Jason. Jason's the only member of the Environmental Integrity Committee that we've got here. Jason, so just maybe some background about what the role of the Environmental Integrity Committee is, and how you see the role going forward in actually ensuring that the kind of CO2 issued under the standard will actually be the kind of CO2.
Thanks, Robbie. Is this coming through? I suppose firstly to acknowledge the other 6 members. We've gone from recently from 8 to 7 members. So there's a vacant position if anyone's excited to get on the Environmental Integrity Committee. We just work here at the moment for the benefit of the system more broadly. And I suppose that's the I'll get to your question now about how verification will take place and what building a standard entails, I guess. What is it really about? It's about a solid set of rules and a solid system, and the way those talk to one another and the way they interact with the users of that system. In a way, the system without the users, we all know that. The history of building systems, Robbie's been at this for 20 years, but we've also seen systems come and go over the years. And the ICS is very exciting in what it's trying to achieve. The overall objective, the reason that we're all sitting here is to incentivize beneficial activity, stuff that we think is good to do. Whether we want to make sure it aligns with our corporate reporting, absolutely. This activity in itself, it sends market signals about that activity. And the role of the standard, and by extension, our limited role in that as the Environmental Integrity Committee, is to familiarize ourselves with those rules, to oversee their maintenance and their development, because these rules are developing. I suppose that's one of the things about our game, is it's moving so fast and we're playing the game while the rules are emerging. And it's actually really difficult. If you talk to people who are working on PhDs in environmental attribute certificates, I guess as with any higher degree or something like that, the trick is how to draw the line. There's so much exciting stuff happening every week, but certainly I think what the ICS is trying to achieve, and the establishment of those governance structures. How do you deal with regulation? How do these systems interact with mandatory and other voluntary systems? There was a question from Alec. What will be fungible in different systems and how we use the things? Robbie answered one question to say, well, once we've issued it, what you do with it is to some extent your own debacle. I mean, it's easy to say. We say it sometimes in the Rex market as well. But it's also challenging to hear things like, well, there's been triple accounting going on in projects. And And again, I'm coming to the nuts and bolts of how we do that. I think you've seen much of that already. But if you think about national reporting, for example, international reporting, the thing that these market-based systems allow us to do is to have really good information. There were nine principles for the ICS. That first one, Robbie, just says information, I think, and why it's number one. But that transparent information, the 4.7 million trees that Food and Trees have planted. We want that information out there, and we want to build on it. So the integrity committee, and it is probably 4 or 5 meetings already that we've had. I don't know if there was confirmation, but the documents are live, by the way. So enjoy the reading. I suppose that's what the EIC, there's still hundreds and hundreds of pages, and trying to flatten the structure and increase the efficiency and reduce the transaction costs, all the things that the ICS is trying to do. We don't want to reduce the rigor of it, at the end of the day. What the EIC's task will be is to ensure that 1 ton of CO2 or equivalent has been reduced, and that we can serialize it, we can identify it, we can track it, and we can track its ownership. A lot of that is happening in the platform. Our role, I suppose, is those, unfortunately for our sins, and that's why I say there's a vacant position, is poring over those hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. Many of these questions I would defer to others who, as I said, my other colleagues who know the European green taxonomy backwards, and really can advise the people using that system, and to understand the permutations of the component methodologies, and how we reduce those methodologies that Robbie showed in the beginning it was a biogas type setup. And basically you've got whatever it was, 15 times 18 times 34 permutations of the way your project could be verified. How do we reduce those and simplify them? But also only that simple, as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, the floor is, there's the first, can I
Can you give us a
This is
some practical
practical.
example, like the number of trees that were planted, but other practical examples of projects?
Look, so
just repeat the question.
sorry for the online. The question from the floor is some example of projects, and I suppose the way to, let me give you my take on it. I sort of think about renewable energy in the rest of the world. But there are any greenhouse gas reducing project, right? So any of the methodologies, they may be in South Africa, dilemma is energy, but there's all sorts of other, there's water, there's agriculture, there's land use change, there's avoided deforestation, there's afforestation.
Yes, can I ask maybe Olivia to just talk a little bit about different project types?
Is that getting at your, no. Good. No, not good.
The ICS is technology agnostic, if you will. We've got no limitations or conditions for specific technologies. So for example, the VCS is a carbon program that excludes large-scale grid-connected renewable energy in countries that are not least developed countries. So we don't have limitations like that. Any technology is accepted, any project is accepted, so long as you can meet the rules of the standard. And that includes, you need to demonstrate additionality, you need to demonstrate that your monitoring is in compliance with your monitoring methodology. You need to go through the independent auditing process of that, and also the approval at the governance levels. Is that?
More questions? Can I maybe pass you a roving mic? So not this one, keep this one. This one is not the best. Right.
Dennis, hear me now? You raised the point, I think the terminology is ontology, so about the different kind of terms for definitions for metadata structures for similar terms. It must be work being done on that ontology to define it.
Just repeat the question.
So the question was whether we considered terminology and the definitions of those terminologies that we use. What we're not trying to define those in sense of how the different parts of the system speak to each other, but it's a way of how we mapping the different parts. So, for example, in the database, we'll talk about tables and entities. Whereas in the mathematical modeling, we'll talk about things like sets and domains. So it's in our documentation, we describe what we mean by those different terms, but some of them are domain specific. So Olivia will talk about climate change or carbon standard terms, and I'll talk about mathematical modeling terms. It's more about how we interact with each other in terms of how those align.
It's just the ontology, just the domains being like with mining, agriculture, same, the in-group language basically, it's translated.
I think maybe just make a comment here. Is this thing working there? No.
Robbie, if we take it yours, take this one.
No, it's fine. So what Philip's talking about is the behind the scenes language that the average user will not be exposed to. So when we talk about the words that the average user will be exposed to, one of the documents that's available now is a glossary that basically defines how we use certain words in the standard. I'm not sure that answered your question, but
Fine, we will pick it up. Thank you.
thank you.
Just a quick question to the technical development team. Is there an API to software?
So what we need is we needed an API in order to get industrial or sensor data automation. So we've created a generic RESTful API with API keys and secrets in order for the projects to send data onto the platform. Once we have the data on the platform, that's where we can process the data and calculate the emission reduction. And then finally, there's going to be an API integration with the registry, but that's going to be closed off. Is there a specific API you're looking for?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want it simplistically, it's really easy. There is an API between the two. Take carbon credits that are generated on the ICS and trade them on an existing platform. So and that would include integration with the registry. So at the moment, there's central registry oversight, but the trading platform, all the credits that are being created by the projects discussed would easily be tradable.
Okay, so our focus has really been on generating credible carbon credits, and as Jason said, perfectly in a rigorous way. And I would recommend that you speak to Bertin and Etienne over here about the trading.
Yeah, I think the point that I'm making is that if you've got carbon credits coming from your project, if you don't have a willing buyer, willing seller market to trade them on, then they're pretty illiquid. So you've now turned it into a liquid asset. And if the API exists, it's a really straightforward process.
There are a lot of features that we can still build, but we'll get to them in good time.
Just a comment, we've had the effort on a retainer to build this for the past, probably about 4 years now, can't remember. It's longer than the human memory can stretch. And we will maintain that relationship. So if there's requirements with respect to technical development, we will be in a position to address that. But I do suggest that we take this discussion offline. And please let us take this discussion offline. Next question.
You've got projects registered currently under the CDM. When you transition to ICS standards. And so maybe repeat that for the online one. So just transitioning your project that's registered under CDM to this standard, and if you've had any credits that were provisionally issued during this period of change from Jan 2021 onwards, in Parasol, getting that to your standard and then issued to the COA system. So that will help you to that.
Shall I?
Yeah, go for it, Robbie.
Olivia, do you want to answer it or should I? Okay, so the thing about the ICS is if you don't have a approved component methodologies that you require for the standard on the system, you can't transition. So the first step is to make sure that let's pick a random thing. Let's what's on this hydro. Let's say there's a renewable energy project. You need a project description. You need an additionality. You need baseline and monitor. On the additionality, we've written into the standard that if additionality has been proven under the CDM BCS or gold standard, you do not have to reprove additionality. So first step is make sure that you've got the right component methodology. Second step is you don't have to reprove additionality. Third step is that because of the nature of the platform, you can only issue credits from the date that your devices are activated on the ICS. So let's say, for instance, you issued under the CDM until the 31st of December 2020, and thereafter you haven't issued. Let's say, for instance, you've had 5 years of crediting period left. Now you come onto the ICS and you can only issue from the 1st of January 2024 onwards. So what we will allow you to do is to take the 5 years that you had left and add that as a crediting period. So we cannot extend that crediting period. In other words, if you had only 1 year left, we can't let you issue for another 10 years now. But that gap, you get to add on that you didn't issue for, you get to add that on to the end of your crediting period. So those are the requirements. You want to add anything?
Can I just add about the provisional credits that may have been issued, for instance, under the CDM? We haven't actually thought about it, but in principle, I think we should think about it. And right now, I feel quite positive towards the issuance of provisional credits. And that's because those provisional credits have already gone through the full audit process at the CDM. They've been independently audited and approved by the CDM, which is not a small task.
Does it answer your question? Next question. Was that a head scratch? There's a question here from Steve.
Steve Thorpe, Energy Fields. This is a new system that you're introducing. Is there an intention to take the project and use it as a guinea pig to test the system, or have you done that already?
Philip, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thanks. So Robert has mentioned the pilot project that we've done. Into Foods has been kind enough to be a guinea pig for us. We've been collecting data from the solar PV project over the last year, and using an IoT device. And that project has gone smoothly. They have approximately 500 fictitious credits so far from the system. The idea, though, is that while you develop your methodologies, you can have an example project where you can upload data into a platform and it can calculate what the sort of credit you would get from the project. We would like to encourage experimenting, and we will help in terms of getting those methodologies in place to test different types of projects.
I see it's about just after 12 now. We'll take more questions, but in the meantime, while we're taking more questions, if we can send a spy to the outside world and just go and check, maybe just go and check how the things are going there. In the meantime, let's take more questions.
So it's a question maybe like philosophical using additionality, and how can we balance sort of where it's additionality is it's a sort of subjective metric per project. How then, and they'll use one of the component methodologies of developer to then say, without carbon credits, I could not or I would not do this project. What do you need to consider when that gets to the integrity committee to say, yes, we agree, you could not do this project? Or, which I think is also a different case to say, yes, we agree, you would not do this project.
Olivia, do you want to talk about methodologies? I can be probably on in a 5-day discussion about it, but I think I'll step back and hide behind the podium.
I think that there are a number of well-established ways of demonstrating additionality that have been, the principles behind it have been really well established in the key development mechanism, for example, used within the verified carbon standard and gold standard. They have, one of the criticisms is that perhaps these tools and these methods of demonstrating additionality haven't been implemented as rigorously as they should be. And that really comes down to auditing as well. And I think that's key. The world is looking to make sure that there are these increased measures to demonstrate additionality. But in my opinion, we have the tools, they're just not implemented always to the full extent. And that's a governance and auditing problem. And that needs to be addressed at number one, if we can develop component methodologies for additionality. In some instances, component methodologies can be approved by the Environmental Integrity Committee. They will need to make a call whether they have the expertise or are you targeting that auditors that are going to service another standard, or one of the biggest barriers is the audit function? How will you make that? So I think the training will be open to all auditors. Accreditation with the ICS does rely on a couple of key points. One of that is the training. So that will be incredibly important. The auditor question is really, we have a real shortage of auditors in the country, even perhaps globally. And our initial thought was to say that auditors could be accredited if they are accredited by the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, for SANS 14,064.
that was a good idea, but it seems that there's still a backlog of accredited auditors in South Africa against that standard. And we recognize that is a huge issue. So what we've said as an interim measure is that we would like to accept auditors who have already been accredited under the CBM or the ICS. Again, we would like to leverage on all the work that legacy standards have carbon programs have done. They have extensive, onerous, expensive auditor accreditation programs. And auditors have passed through on that basis. We'd like to welcome them in.
Does that answer the question? Cool. Then I will share with you the secret that there's food outside. I'm sure there's more questions, but the team will be available. So please catch them, talk to them, ask them questions. And just to reiterate what I said at the end of the presentation is this thing can go nowhere. We don't build a strong community around it. We do believe that it can be something that can make a significant contribution, and we really ask you to engage and get involved and to contact us. Enjoy the snacks and
Right.